If combat feels slow, repetitive, or forgettable, it's not because it's boring, it's just because it needs meaning. This episode is all about running meaningful combat and making combat more than just about rolling initiative. By the end of this episode, you're going to be able to make combat serve the story, add tension, adding complexity, make every fight feel different, and keep players engaged between turns. Welcome to StoryForge DM, where I help you become the best DM you can possibly be. Let's start out by talking about why combat matters. What combat is storytelling under pressure, character values revealed through action, and consequences made visible. If fighting doesn't change anything, then why is it here even in the first place? With combat, it's really important to focus on some of the little things, like what a character might be feeling, or letting a PC portray what a character might be feeling during the particular combat. That adds role play into the dice role play, if you follow my drift. Doing this makes the encounters so much more impactful, so much bigger, and so much more exciting. Of course, maybe the PC wants to say, I brandish my axe and I throw it, or the like, in order to really emphasize what they're doing. Maybe they want to describe their actions or the like. But also, when we have an encounter and when we have issues that are within the encounter, I mean things that are more than just swinging an axe or a sword or casting a spell, these can make the encounters and the combats that much more effective, impactful, and memorable. The best way to make sure that combat and encounters are engaging is to design them purposely, or rather to design them with purpose. Before every combat, it should be known what's at stake. It should be known as well what changes if players lose. And of course, what happens if they win too easily? Some of the ways that you can make combat more interesting is adding in time constraints or time pressure. You can add in hazardous environments, or you could always add in NPCs that are in danger. These are 3 quick ways that you can make the encounter much more exciting. Rather than, I roll to attack, I roll my damage, the guy's dead or wounded. You could have a situation where there are NPCs that are in danger, maybe of being attacked by these particular foes. Let's say goblins in the forest waylay the party. Maybe they have captives at their camp and the party can hear the captives screaming for help. This adds a certain element of realism and a certain roundness to the combat. Rather than having it a flat line, it's almost like there's other things happening. And maybe that PC that doesn't really do much in combat wants to go and try and skirt the forest to try and see what's over there. That can always add in a huge element to the combat in order to make it that much more dynamic. Environmental hazards are one of the coolest things you can add to a combat, and there's so many different ways to do it. The simplest is rain or wind. Rain and wind can affect visibility, it can affect the arrows flying through the air, or possibly even the spells flying through the air. I mean, think about it. If it's raining really, really hard, and the druid wants to throw a ball of fire, maybe that ball of fire is affected by the rain. There's so many different things that you can do that can impact the game. Another thing you could do is, let's say the wind is at your back or at an archer's back. That could be a really cool way to implement wind into the game. So maybe you mention it right off the hop and say, the wind right now is coming from the east. You might want to reposition if you're going to fire accurate arrow shots. And what that could mean is the player, if he fires where he's from, has a negative to hit, right? Because he's got to arc the arrow. However, if he goes to where the wind's at his back, maybe he has a bonus to damage because the arrow is going to fly that much more powerfully at its target. And time pressure is another thing you can do. Perhaps there's someone, let's say in that goblin encampment, perhaps there's one of the goblins that is actively trying to get away to go and let more goblins know. You don't have to tell your PCs that, by the way. But if there's one that's very evidently trying to get away, you can make that known to your PCs, and they may look around the table and think, we got to deal with that guy while dealing with this. Because if we don't deal with him, he may go tell more or do this or that or the next. And maybe that, of course, leads to tracks and the like that may lead to further developments with this particular encounter. But of course, adding that time pressure will unarguably make it more impactful. Combat as character development has more impact than you think. Watch how characters fight. Who protects one another? Who jumps in to heal? Who takes risks? And who hesitates? These are all big-time character traits that should translate into their role play as well. And it also is really fun to talk about after the session because you can say, wow, your character seems like the guy who just jumps right in, doesn't care what's going on, and just wants to get things fixed. These kind of character traits make the fights and the combats much more memorable because, of course, it's not just about rolling the dice and swinging your axe. It's about what they do in a certain situation. Perhaps the halfling cleric is someone who hesitates. They stay back all the time, but they make sure that they help and protect the other PCs. This is really important, and then it can actually play into alignment. Personally, I have no problem changing my PC's alignment as well, and I encourage you to do the same. If the character is acting way out of their alignment, change their alignment. This can really get a PC's attention. So let's say there's a bunch of townsfolk and they're brandishing pitchforks and axes, and the paladin walks in and he says, I think you guys are doing something very wrong. And let's say they are. Maybe they're causing political unrest. But he meets that political unrest by drawing his longsword and starts taking down townsfolk. Most paladins would need to atone. The best thing for a paladin to do right off the hop is talk their way through it. Maintain that goodness. Of course, unless they're an evil paladin, but that's a story for another day. The point is you want to lean into the moments narratively. When a player decides to stand in front of another player to try and absorb some of the damage, maybe let it happen. That's kind of a cool thing. Let's say that paladin is injured, but decides he's going to stand in front of this halfling cleric in order to save the life. It might be an idea to just make a call and say, you know what, it works. Don't even need to roll dice, don't need to look up rules, just have it a part of the narrative. And maybe the paladin goes down because of it. But again, it could be totally worth it because it could play into the story and really showcase the characters' togetherness. Of course, in this paradigm, the cleric is probably just going to heal the paladin, going to get back up and start swinging. But these are the things that make combat really cool and also bring RP into combat. I think one of the biggest things to remember here is that combat isn't about hit points. It's about choices under pressure. And that's where great stories are forged. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Stories Forged DM. Smash that subscribe button and drop a like to support my channel. Pop into the comments section and drop a comment about your most memorable combat moment.